Recorded at the studios of Chicago Public Media, WBEZ, this is Stages to Success. The drive to excel is universal, as is the pride in a job well done. Whether you're staring down a decision maker for a multi-million-dollar contract, a television camera or microphone, a negotiating adversary, or an irate conductor, the pressure to perform can be exhilarating and exhausting. Join me and meet great storytellers from music and business. Today's guests from the symphony orchestra world are Christopher Wu from the first violin section of the Pittsburgh Symphony and Douglas Prosser, principal trumpet of the Rochester Philharmonic Orchestra and formerly of the Barcelona Orchestra. Chris and Doug both faced a potential career-ending scenario, but for very different reasons. We jumped right in talking about that topic. My first question, because I was there pretty close after for Chris and with Doug. I remember when I came over to the Olympics, it was already in the rearview mirror. But Chris, you were at what age when this car accident happened?
I was 26.
And how many years had you been playing with the symphony then?
It was my fourth season with the orchestra.
And are you in your 33rd? Did I do my math right?
No, I'm in my 30th.
30th.
I'm in my 30th season.
Yeah. Okay. So, 26 years later of seasons. Doug, when this syndrome or whatever first hit you, you were in what year at Barcelona in the chair?
Let's see, it was 92. So what is that, my fourth season maybe? Fourth or fifth season.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And in Doug, I'm going to basically start with you just because yours isn't a, one-time traumatic accident. It's something that you saw coming. You saw inklings of it. What did you notice what was going on, and what were the signs, and when did you realize this may be more serious than just a bad week?
Just an inability to do the basic stuff that we all know as musicians that we can do. We're pretty sensitive to minute details. When you're warming up, if you feel puffy, if your left hand, in the case of a violin or bow arm, feels stiff or something like that, you warm up and you go through it and you push through it and you feel good. But this was something completely different.
Was it like I remember when I played softball in a league, and I'd grown up. I remember Chris was a real jock. I'd grown up doing I grew up doing a ton of sports. And so there I am on the softball field, not having warmed up, just showing up, actually, I think from a rehearsal straight to a softball game, and then getting a ball hit to me in right field and wanting to make the throw that I've made 4,000 times and feeling electricity run through my entire arm. And that was basically a torn bursa in the shoulder. Doug, was it like that? Were you playing and you thinking, wow, something just happened, or was it gradual in your warm-ups?
Well, I sustained the injury during a time when the orchestra was doing a lot of recording.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not remembering clearly, John, if you were still in the orchestra
Nope,
at that time.
I wasn't. I was not.
You had already left. So
Yep.
We were recording the national anthem for all of the countries that were coming to the 92 Olympics. And it was a long, arduous process, and there was a lot of repetition requested from the orchestra. And so it happened over a period of time when there was a very intense amount of work for us. And I didn't notice any pain. I just noticed that I didn't have the ability really to form a good embouchure,
Mm-hmm.
a functional embouchure, and to be able to function in my day-to-day activities.
Yeah,
you have to make a good sound. You have to play in tune. You have to lead the brass section. And so I was not really
Right.
not able to do all those things kind of conspicuously.
Well, and to inform our listeners, especially the people that listen to the real estate portion of the show, the term embouchure is a French word that we throw around as professional musicians. Like everybody should know this term, but give it a description, Doug.
Yeah, embouchure. If you want to think of, say, since you're speaking baseball metaphors, how you hold a bat, what your stance is, can you grip? It almost would be a little bit akin to, a slugger who, for some reason, can't exert the proper control or a grip over his bat.
Right, but we're wind players, and it's where our mouth attaches to the instrument in one way, shape, form, or another, depending on if you're a brass player or woodwind player. Obviously, a string player like Chris is never going to use the word embouchure. It's just not going to happen. And also just the basics of the repertoire. You're playing national anthems. That's big for trumpet, right? Martial music, heroic music. That's trumpet land. Plain and simple.
For that kind of repertoire, we're playing a lot. Usually, tends to be a lot of transcriptions for orchestra of music that was originally written for band.
Right.
So, a fair amount of playing and not a super high level of sophistication about editing processes and taking several takes, 10, 15 takes of the same piece or same section of a piece. And so I was young and I think probably could have done a better job of protecting myself. And I think that, there could have obviously been a better job done on how we were managed as an orchestra in that particular situation. But,
But I played in that group. I played in that group, and we did not have union controls over those typical things.
Yeah, our collective bargaining agreement in that orchestra was 3 pages long.
Right, exactly. So Doug, you're overplaying. It's like running a starting pitcher out there 5, 6, 7, 8 days in a row. And what was the first thing you noticed? Was it range? Was it control? Was it, my gosh, I can't even keep a steady tone? What was it?
Yeah, it was that. It was basically can't keep a steady tone, can't hold my pitch center, the color of the sound, the timbre of the sound, kind of sort of feeling like I was, if you're a runner, like you're limping a little bit. So it was conspicuous to me. It was noticeable to people around me. And within a very short period of time, I requested some time off and had some tests done, some medical tests done. But just to kind of be out of the orchestra for a while and say, hey, take a pause. Something's going on here. I have to figure out what it is. I have been overworked in the past. I have been tired in the past. This is something above and beyond, those experiences.
And how much time did you ask for off?
That was indefinite. I said, I think that I may have a problem, may have an injury, and I don't really know. I need some time off. Interesting kind of a sort of juxtaposition in Spain of some of the poor work conditions we had. We did have really good benefits in that orchestra, and I had medical leave, ended up having medical leave with almost 100% salary for the better part of 7 months.
Okay.
So,
and let's just rewind the tape a little bit. Were you, before you started to do this crazy recording schedule, and it kind of reminds me of the Montreal Symphony. Remember, they were kind of famous for doing their recordings after concerts. Did you hear those stories?
Yep, absolutely.
And you're already burnt out after playing a Mahler Symphony, and then you walk into a recording studio 45 minutes later to record at 11 p.m.? Where were you, Doug? Just playing wise, I remember your playing. I mean, you were like God's gift to the brass section when you showed up in that orchestra. But where were you? Did you feel in your playing just as the train came off the tracks? Were you like, this is easy, I've got this, I'm wanting to do more concertos, I'm bored? Where were you mentally and with your career?
I felt prepared. I felt like very prepared. From having worked with Barbara Butler and Charles Geyer at Eastman, my two teachers.
But now you're in the fourth year of that orchestra over there in Spain. Where were you right before? Were you thinking, I need to audition more? I need to, take the next step? Were you feeling like, my playing is great. I like the lifestyle here. I'm just laying back. I'm going to practice a little bit less. Where were you exactly, do you think?
I think I was still at a phase where I was really enjoying being in Spain, living in Barcelona. It's a fascinating city. It's a fascinating country. I was still mastering Spanish. I was still mastering Catalan.
Were you married yet?
Enjoying friendships. Yeah, I was married. Yep. Max, my first son, was born in 91. This happened in 92. And this happened maybe a couple, 2 or 3 months before my second son, Nico, was born in June of 92. So leading up to the Summer Olympics of 92. I was enjoying it. I was having a good time. I think I was chafing a little bit at some of the things that bothered me about living over there, and I was enjoying a lot of it, enjoying the job, but feeling like it was in some ways a bit of an uphill battle working with some of their ideas about work ethic and how the orchestra was managed.
But but Chris and you and I we all know that once the kids arrive and that paycheck's coming from work, it's a whole different ballgame. Every audition you go to, every step up, thing you do, every extra concert, you're reminded of the dollars that are chasing that musical position that you would have done for free when you were 19.
Absolutely.
Right. It's just
absolutely.
Now, Chris, I'm going to shift over to you.
Actually, can I ask Doug a quick question over there?
Yeah.
So sometimes when you play, you think some things are happening in your playing, but sometimes you don't really know. When you requested that year or that time off, were people talking to you, or was that completely you brought that on just by yourself?
I requested it in a very short period of time because I knew something was wrong, and I knew that it would be prudent to take some time off. We've all had situations where you're injured for one reason or another, and I need to rest, or I need to take a few days off, or and it was one of those situations where feeling like I shouldn't play for a few days, and then coming back after those few days, assessing the situation and thinking, you know what, I think I need a few more days above and beyond that. So that was me requesting time off probably within a week or two of noticing what was going on.
But nobody at work was saying, "Hey, Doug, why don't you take some time off?" It hadn't got to that point yet.
It hadn't got to that situation, and I don't remember exactly what repertoire we were playing. We did have a new music director at that time. Garcia Navarro was our new music director after Franz Paul Decker had resigned, and I felt uneasy about his leadership. He was someone who was many conductors that we work with. We make music with them in a very collaborative way, and it's a very beautiful, almost transcendental, spiritual experience for us. And we've all had conductors that we know that are very, they're the boss man, the authoritarian approach. And Garcia Navarro was very much that way. He loved to wield his power and hold the power over the musicians. And so that definitely made me feel uneasy.
Right.
And I think it was a prudent move just to step aside and say, hey, this is a medical issue that needs to get resolved. I suspect it could be a medical issue that needs to get resolved. Take time off and heal.
Right.
And with Chris, Doug, the three of us have known each other over 35 years, which is just stunning to think about. Chris, you always struck me as like one of the most ambitious violinists and musicians I ever met. Going back to when you were 18, when I first met you. You were in your fourth season in Pittsburgh. I remember you were coming out to the Aspen Festival. You were doing something else when you had your car accident. Where was your playing right then at that period? Were you all over it? I'm auditioning for everything I can. Everything's feeling great. I'm clicking. Where were you?
Actually, I would say that, when you get a job, you feel on top of the world. And so I was grateful for 4 seasons. I certainly was thrilled to be playing in Pittsburgh, but I had taken some auditions in Boston, not necessarily because I love the Boston Symphony, but because 2 of my best friends in the Pittsburgh Symphony had just gotten jobs there.
Yeah, and you're a social animal. That was Owen, right?
It was Owen Young and Ed Gonzalez, who recently left and now is teaching at Indiana University. But I was visiting a friend in Aspen. Actually, I was visiting my girlfriend at the time, who was also an Eastmanite, and we went up and we were going to cook some food together with some friends, and the friends were late, and so we decided to just go up to Independence Pass and just go out and marvel at the incredible beauty out there. And on our way down, my friend Eric Kim, who's still on the faculty at Aspen Music Festival and teaches at Indiana University, ironically enough, was coming down and just missed a turn. And we went over an edge, and the car flipped over 3 times. And after the first or second flip, it hit a tree, and I exited out the back windshield of the car.
And I remember your description of it. Doug is from Colorado. Doug, I'm sure you've driven over Independence Pass.
I know Independence Pass very intimately because I played in the NRO, which back in the day was the Colorado Philharmonic, and they were based in Evergreen. I think they're in Breckenridge now, but we had a trek over to Aspen every Sunday night after our concert, which would usually end around 6. 4 or 5 of us would pile into. It was my 1967 Mercury Park Lane. It was a boat, a car.
Yeah.
And we would drive Independence Pass, and we would get into Aspen. I can't remember. Sometime late at night. I remember driving that road many times, maybe 8 or 9 times that summer. And growing up, I remember driving it. A lot of it is one way.
Yep.
You have to kind of go kind of slow. You have to make sure you don't have oncoming traffic. And if you do, you have to agree who's going to go first.
Yep.
Right.
But we always enjoyed driving that. We'd get there, it'd be completely dark out, go to the very top. I think it might be above 13,000 feet.
Yep.
And the stars on a clear night up there were just absolutely spectacular.
Do you specifically remember the car rolling and, thinking, I am in a very serious situation here? Do you have a memory of that?
No, I remember that the car. I remember basically it hitting the edge, and then that's the last thing I remember was that we were starting to go down, and I don't remember anything after that except for maybe being in the hospital, which your brother was there, right?
Yes, yes, he was. And
your brother was in the Aspen hospital.
Yeah, when
I went there.
And the ER doc had made a reply to my brother about the severity of something that just came in. So your next memory, Chris, was actually waking up at the hospital?
Yeah, actually, I remember, and I don't know if this is because someone has told me this or if I actually remember it. The first memory that I have that I know that I remember clearly was waking up in a helicopter as they're transporting me to Denver and asking if I can sit up because I've never been in a helicopter before. but I had broken vertebrae and stuff, and they said, no, I don't think that's really a good idea. I remember asking that because I just thought it was so cool that I was in a helicopter. I don't really believe that I knew how severely injured I was at the time.
Yeah, that is so Chris Wu. That optimistic, wow, this is really cool. Like I'm in an ambulance or I'm in a helicopter. Is that a real operating room? Oh my gosh.
Exactly. Actually,
pilot to incline the helicopter so you could look down and have a good view.
I should have. Now, looking back, I probably should have done that, Doug, but I didn't do that. I actually have been back since, and what I do notice is that there are a lot more guardrails there on Independence Pass now that were not there years ago. It was 25 years on the day, the 25-year anniversary of it, I went up to say a little prayer where I believe I went off, and it is amazing to just imagine the whole thing all over again, and definitely grateful to be here talking to you both.
There was a story about Pablo Casals that when he fell and crushed his hand, that he looked at his hand, he said, "Thank God, I'll never have to play again," because his career had totally consumed his life. I assumed that, just knowing your guys' age and your ambitions, that the idea of an accident, that the first thing was, I need to recover, not, oh my gosh, now I can do something else. But I don't know your story, Chris. I mean, were you whipped into practicing as a child?
No, actually, amazingly, and I really do, I thank God for this. I broke my collarbone, but that was the only thing that happened to my arms and hands that affected my violin playing. And it didn't even really affect my violin playing because it was the right side. So my bow arm was not, I could still move my bow. I was actually playing the back, my face and my back were really the things that were the most dramatically affected. And I was playing in the hospital 2 weeks after the accident, just sitting in my room going, hey, I can do this.
I remember you telling me that, and the people were crying.
Well, I don't know if they were crying because of how bad it sounded, but there's always that.
But the back is no joke for a violinist. My uncle Bud was a concert master. I know that back pain could be completely debilitating as a player, right?
Absolutely. And I mean, I have to admit, I was more concerned about my golf game than my violin career, because I was thinking, oh my gosh, am I not going to be able to play golf anymore? But I was sitting in the hospital playing, and it was like, you know what? It's just a matter of healing. And they had replaced some bone in my vertebrae with some hip, they scraped off some bone from my hip and pieced it together and put 2 metal rods in my back. And in a few weeks, I came back home. I have to tell you one funny story. So as Doug was talking about his maestro, we had a notorious maestro, Lauren Mazel, who really liked to control things as well. And he always seemed in control and very strict and very stern. But the first time I ever saw him, I think I scared him a little bit, because my face really was swollen, and I had a big scar on my face from going out, getting it cut from the back windshield. But he was so gracious and so kind, and it was just amazing to see him in such a tender moment, because we rarely saw that on the podium.
Yeah, that side of that man.
Doug, teachable moment for him.
Yeah, really. Doug, what I remember about visiting you in Barcelona in '92 was you talking about the fact that you're searching out the expert to deal with this syndrome. Is it really called Satchmo Syndrome after Louis Armstrong?
So, yeah, I came into awareness of that term after having visited a neurologist in Barcelona who referred me to a plastic surgeon who also lived in Barcelona, had a clinic in Barcelona, and he shared with me an article that was co-written by Phil Farkas and might have been...
You and I know who Phil Farkas is, and I'm right here in his town, but explain for the casual listener who Phil Farkas is.
It's just a very incredibly well-known pedagogue and performer, horn player of great fame, many, many years. He's an icon in the horn world.
Right.
And so he co-wrote an article with a surgeon that got published in the American Journal of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery. This article, I think, might have had the title Satchmo Syndrome or Curing Satchmo Syndrome, and it was enlightening. It talked about different case studies of brass players who had injured themselves. And this neurologist pointed out to me that there was a plastic surgeon in Barcelona. Jaime Planas was his name, and he had a very successful plastic and reconstructive surgery clinic in Barcelona, and he had done an operation. And this operation on a trumpet player was explained in the article.
And explain to the casual listener, my understanding is that injury for Louis Armstrong is what ended his trumpet career and probably began his singing career, right? Can you just touch on that?
Yeah, I don't think it completely ended his trumpet career. He went through a time where he was not playing as much and started singing. And so then after that, he combined singing and playing, and I think probably kept a close eye on how he was playing and how his embouchure felt. But yeah, that was also spelled out in the article that Louis Armstrong did have a problem and dealt with the problem as best he could. In my case, I had an operation. I don't think Louis Armstrong, that I'm aware of, ever had any surgical intervention.
Right.
But yeah, and so doing that research on Louis Armstrong and other brass players, the term Satchmo Syndrome was born in that article. Maybe it was born before that, but that was the first I had ever heard of it.
And for you to describe it to the person who's not there, was there a physical manifestation of, in your embouchure, in your lip, in your mouth, in your gums, what was the component that had to be fixed surgically?
My surgeon said that it was a muscle sprain. So there was an incision made on my upper lip. The skin was peeled back. The muscle was sutured, and everything was sewn back up and tidied up and left to heal. So the big problem that I had after that is that I had, in the suture of the muscle, that I had a tight spot in my embouchure that I had to kind of learn to work around and to manage.
Right, and we're talking about microns. I mean, for the person who's not been a classical musician, you make Chris, you move a millimeter on your fingerboard, and it's an audible difference. Doug, you talk about this muscle being resutured. That can be a change in an octave in your playing, and just highlight that a little.
So the muscle we're talking about is like a rubber band, a circular rubber band that is basically sits above and below your lips, the orbicularis oris.
There you go.
It just sort of pops out into my memory suddenly. But it's like a rubber band, and you can contract it, you can stretch it. And one thing that happened in suturing up this muscle is that it elongated a little bit, and so I lost a little bit of grip, a little bit of power in that muscle. So I had to just spend a lot of time going over basic pedagogical constructs of how I created my technique when I was younger. A lot of it felt very, very different for me. And so I didn't have a home base feeling that I was used to. I had to kind of recreate that kind of from nothing.
Was that true for you, Chris? Did you feel like I've got to rebuild my playing, or was it I'm going to be back? I'm going to be right where I was. I just have to start slow.
It was a little of both. I actually didn't have to rebuild. I just had to get my strength back into playing. Muscles get deconditioned and things like that when you're out for a while. But it was a matter, I couldn't wait to get back. In fact, the saddest day for me through the whole accident wasn't the accident or laying in a hospital. It was not being able to play opening night with the orchestra. I remember sitting and listening on the radio to the orchestra. I was like, gosh, I really want to be there.
You're such a gamer. You would have made a really lousy harp player or percussionist. Or I've heard it said, my favorite composer is the one who didn't write for my instrument that week. And I'm not going to give credit to the person who said it.
Well, I was also curious from Doug's point.
I'm so glad I get to stay home tonight.
Exactly.
Exactly. Now I'm like, oh, can I stay home? But Doug, was it for you relearning? Is it like Tiger Woods redoing his golf swing, or was it there was just relearning how to do what you already did?
Yeah, I had to lean on a lot of memory. Like, I remember going back and playing pieces that I played in high school, or playing pieces that I played during my time at Eastman, and really consciously focusing on what did that feel like when I did that? What was that? Let me see if I can recreate that. And so with those memories, I was able to sort of create a pathway for myself, but I didn't have that feeling initially. It was sort of like in a no man's land. Like I can kind of play, I can kind of make a sound, but I have to have something to guide me. And it was really slow going after my operation. I could only play 4 or 5 minutes a day, and that was it. And I thought, I don't want to hurt myself again. So I was psychologically a little bit subject to that fear of re-injury. And, but I did lean a lot on just how did this feel before this happened to me when I was playing well. And I also spent a lot more time just singing through things and auralizing and audiation and for your listeners, that just means, really, really intense hearing. It's like an aural or auditory image of what you want to create that's very, very focused and very clear in your mind. And I don't think I'd ever really practiced quite that way before. So those were the two linchpins of giving me kind of a pathway to kind of track on something and move back into into my skill set and create a new skill set for myself.
We're listening to an interview with Doug Prosser of the Rochester Philharmonic and Chris Wu of the Pittsburgh Symphony. So you had, Chris, it sounds like you had that 2 weeks you're laid out. You're just focused on the goal. I'm going to get back. I'm going to get back in the orchestra. I'm going to assume it never dawned on you that once I get back there, my playing might be shot. I might not be able to make a comeback. That probably never ran across your mind, did it?
No, it didn't. Actually, I was going to ask Doug. I remember having one surgery. There was one surgery because my carotid artery had dissected, and so they had to put a needle through my femoral artery and blow up a balloon to stop the bleeding. And that was the one surgery that I thought this one could end my career, because they said if the balloon detaches too early, you could suffer a stroke, but if you don't do the surgery, you could lose your hearing. That was the one surgery I thought, this could end my career. But Doug, were you thinking that when you had your surgery?
Yeah, I felt I had some guarded optimism. I kind of surrendered to it, to be honest with you. I realized that it was going to be, a do or die kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have a clear sense of what my path would be in life after that. I didn't even know what other interests that I might pursue. I did go out and buy a bunch of power tools while I was in recovery. It was so therapeutic for me. I put together a breakfast table for our kitchen. I made a bunch of shelves. I just kept myself really busy. Before the surgery, though, I did feel comforted by my physician. He was Javier Planas. He was probably in his late 70s, 80s, and he was such a gentle, wonderful presence when he examined me, and he exuded a lot of confidence. He told me that he'd done an operation on a trumpet player. It was a jazz lead player in Barcelona who had made a full recovery, and I felt comforted by him. I felt good, and I thought, well, if this doesn't work, I'm young, I can go back to school.
and he's kind of like your good Samaritan in the process.
He was a good Samaritan, and then I had another good Samaritan. I reached out to my teacher at Eastman, Barb Butler,
mm-hmm.
who had a pretty close relationship with Adolf Herseth, the former principal trumpet of the Chicago Symphony. And so Bud Herseth sent a letter to my music director talking about an injury that he had had. He had had a car accident when he was in the middle of his career. And so Herseth typed a letter.
Amazing.
To Garcia Navarro, my music director, and Garcia Navarro called me into his office and shared the contents of that letter with me and gave me the letter.
And to again, for our listeners' benefit, Adolf Herseth in trumpet is bigger than Michael Jordan in basketball. I think that's fair to say.
Comparable, certainly.
An iconic figure, yeah.
So you get a letter from him about, this is what you're doing with the career of this young trumpet player. That's going to speak volumes. That's an amazing story, Doug. I never had heard that before.
So Garcia Navarro, my music director in Barcelona, was good friends with Gerrit Schulte. He had done some work with him. He was invited to guest conduct the Chicago Symphony. There's a relationship there.
Yep.
And so I think based on that Barb thought, well, I'll reach out to Herseth and see if he can say anything on your behalf. I don't remember when it happened in Herseth's career, but he had kind of a catastrophic car accident and had to have his face put back together. And I think he had a plastic mold of his face somehow, and they were able to put his teeth back together in the same position, and he continued. I think he played until he was in his 80s.
Yeah, in the first chair.
In the first chair, yeah. So, yeah. But that was kind of a big deal, and I think that really did bolster my position with my management, my music director. Like, hey, these things can happen. You can have an injury, and you can recover from this. And so, it was an act of of incredible kindness and speaking of Good Samaritan, I don't think I could have ever hoped for anything better than that.
What about you, Chris? Did somebody intervene or intercede on your behalf, either from the medical side or the professional side, that really stuck out?
I just had great doctors. I mean, they all along the ways, and I'm sure Doug, he can remember a lot of the doctors he had. I can remember a lot of the doctors that I had, Dr. Brugman, and they're just people that were there taking care of me. I had one Good Samaritan that I've never met before, but we were stuck up on the hill in Independence Pass, and there's not a lot of traffic there, and it's midnight. And there was someone, so my friend Eric and my girlfriend at the time, Christy, waved down this guy, and he was able to give some blankets to us to keep me warm and then also go drive down to inform someone so that they could call an ambulance. So I'm grateful for those people, obviously. But,
yeah, and we all know there is no cell phone service up there, none.
Yeah, right. There was certainly no cell phone service at that time in '91. And I have to say, Mazel was always, he said, you come back. Whenever you want to come back, you are welcome. And that was it's always nice to have the music director on your side.
Yeah, especially
that was very helpful. Yeah, absolutely. But, we are blessed with so many friends that reached out and, are concerned and caring. And I remember getting letters from David Efren and Gil Kalish's son, my best friend Jonas Kalish, and just that sort of help you through. It's all about relationships, and they really help you through during those tough times. And you look back on it, and you're just grateful for the friendships that you have.
How about a totally different viewpoint? Let's say your career ended that day. Chris, it could have been 6 inches to the left on how you exited that car. Doug, it could have been a failed surgery. Is there an alternate career? I mean, this is just, crazy thinking sometimes, but is there an alternate career that you think, I would have really liked to do that?
Always fascinated by airplanes and flight and aviation. So I was gravitated towards that. So I'm thinking that, there's a possibility there that I would have pursued that avenue. I don't know. It wasn't obvious to me because I remember kind of drawing a blank in my head thinking, okay, what am I going to do? And there wasn't that, there's this other thing that I always loved. And this is, there's the silver lining because now I'm going to have an opportunity to pursue, that. Well, it was more just a little bit of just surrendering and searching for a bit of grace.
And Chris, you and Chris might have been flying helicopters together from what I hear.
Actually, it's funny you asked that question because I have a very good friend who works for UBS who was going to ask me to join his team and be in the financial world. I mean, I love people, so I probably would have gone into the business world like you.
You would have been amazing at UBS, Chris. You would have been amazing there.
It would have been fun.
The impact people in your recovery. You already mentioned Barbara Butler, Doug, but were there people you really leaned on in your recovery period, or asked for advice, or helped you? And you have an awesome wife, so let's have that as a given, okay? But for you, Doug, was there somebody along the way that was a real touchstone for you in your rebuild, kind of like LeBron rebuilt his shot and Tiger rebuilt his game? Who were those people?
I didn't have, in terms of approaching my skill set in the trumpet side, I didn't really have anything that was guiding me, or somebody that I leaned on, or that I went and took lessons with. It was a slow process, but I was encouraged by, the palpable gains that I was making, albeit small, but noticeable gains that I was making. I was back playing in the orchestra within a certain period of time, and I was encouraged by that. I was encouraged, obviously, like you said, by my family and my extended family in Barcelona. And I won the lottery on that. Totally won the lottery on who I married and Hildegard's family in Barcelona. So that, for me, was enough.
Did you have some? I remember those young guys so well that were in your section, in the trumpet section. Back in the brass, were there some guys that, when you came back, just really lifted your spirits?
Yeah, I think if you look at and we both know this because we lived in Barcelona, there's this side of how you do life that's based on your vocation and it's based on your profession. There's a whole other side to life which is based on who are you as a person, and they're not as vocationally focused
as we are,
career focused we are, and so they spend more time socializing with each other. They spend more time connecting with each other, just with families and friends. And I remember living there on Sunday. You remember, nothing was open. You didn't go shopping. You didn't go out and then do anything other than have a meal with your family and maybe go for a walk. And so I felt that from people in the orchestra. There was a really beautiful human side to them, that they were supportive of me. And I think that they were supportive of me because I showed real interest in their language and their culture and their country, and really felt like I wanted to be part of that. And I think that, in some ways they kind of took me under their wing as an adopted son. People from Barcelona and from Valencia alike. A lot of the wind brass players in all the orchestras over in Spain are from Valencia.
Yep.
Brilliant musicians. So, they love to laugh. They love to joke. They love to have a good time. And so all of that was part of my healing.
That's fascinating. So your comeback was almost as much social as it was socially integrated as it was just a purely professional and physical comeback.
Yeah, I socialized with people in the orchestra. I never felt shunned by them. Oh, you were injured and let's get rid of you. And I think there was a sense that, hey, you have a chance to come back and you're playing in the orchestra again. Just take it slow. And it ended up working out.
And I'm gonna tread on some really lightly on dangerous ground here. There are some American orchestras, Doug, and you and I both know where they are, where the people in your section would have been angling for your job big time. Big time.
Yeah, it's we live in the more sort of hyper-capitalist competitive society, and especially with musicians, you go to a cattle call audition, you're dealing with maybe 90, 100 competitors. So who's going to rise to the top? Probably the most hardworking and most ambitious person in there. So, and that's great because it takes you to a very high level. The flip side is that now you have to coexist in a job setting with that person, and where how that plays out with that ambition.
Yep.
And that drive to work really hard sometimes is antithetical to the skill sets that you need to just be a good friend and a good human being to your coworker.
Right. And you and I talked about that ad infinitum when we both worked there. I remember that.
Yep.
How do you rise to the level to be the soloist and the winner, and then be a teammate? Tough.
Yeah. Well, I had great teachers, and I think they modeled a lot of that side of being a musician, just to be a good human being.
Chris, for you, was it your stand partner? Was it people in the section? Who were the impact people as you made your recovery back to the orchestra and you slowly worked your way back in to the point where, oh yeah, he was in a car accident, but he's just one of the guys here?
Probably the same as Doug. I have an incredible extended family. My family was definitely, and I had a wonderful church family that came over, a lot of praying, and then certainly the colleagues in the orchestra were very supportive. Probably one that I'd single out is Ann Mark Dale Williams, who's the principal cellist, and You know, it's what we've been talking about is the relationships and the people that are around you in the orchestra. And Pittsburgh is a very friendly orchestra.
Sure are.
And that's a real and I think Eastman was like that. We all grew up at Eastman, and I think there was a real camaraderie with the people at Eastman. And I'll never forget one thing that Pinka Zuckerman said to me one time was, you know, orchestras need a human resource person to help people get along, because I don't think it's always like that in some orchestras. And, you know, like string quartets where they don't talk to each other. Mm-hmm. And I just can't imagine a situation like that, because it's not like that in Pittsburgh.
Did either of you guys have a moment, and, you know, it's hard for me to reference because I was done playing in symphonies when I was 40. But did you have a moment after the accident where you thought, ooh, I came back too fast, or I pushed it too far? And I better lay back. Did either of you guys overextend in the comeback?
Yeah, I felt like I had that moment yesterday on stage.
You and me both.
I should have gone slower.
That's why I put you guys on this call.
I finally learned that lesson.
Actually, we played Symphonie Fantastique last night, and it was so slow. I was wishing we went faster. So I had the opposite experience.
And Doug, you touched on this a little bit, and you know, I think for our listeners that do sports, you know, I'm still sports crazy and active. It's applicable the way a player comes back, and you touched on it, Doug. In the aftermath, as you rebuilt and you went back to your early learning and thought, I need to get new neural pathways working here, or new warm-ups. Is there anything that you learned in the comeback that you still apply all the time today that you never would have learned had this not happened?
Yeah, I learned how to practice with more visualization. So being in the posture of playing without actually playing, forming the embouchure, breathing, and doing a number of things and engaging the ear, so that I have a really clear idea of what I want to do, and I'm not really exerting those muscles. There's no fatigue involved, but it's all mentally engaging. I've come to find that incredibly valuable, and it is a skill that I probably wouldn't have learned. I wish I'd learned it earlier. Maybe I never would have gotten injured, but you know, brass players and trumpet players in general have to learn not how to be knuckleheads, and so it eventually happened for me. And I try and pass that on with my students at Eastman now to really get them to be efficient, to be smart, to be not so ego-oriented as much as they are just efficiency and being smart.
Yeah, and you know, Don Harry was on my last episode, and we talked a little bit about that early start, right? We all, Chris, you're a violinist, so that early start for you as your technique started to take off, you were probably, what, 10, 11?
Yeah.
And for a wind player, we're maybe 12, 13, right, Doug? Junior high band, high school band?
Fourth grade.
Fourth, because you started. But when did the practice hours really kick in for you, Doug? For me, it was seventh grade.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, sixth, seventh grade, something like that. Yeah.
And I mean, how much can you think? Right, you're burning it in. If you take a long view, and you look back at that age, in 4 years, right, you progress from the Rubank book or the beginner's books, and really in 4 years, all of a sudden you're starting to play some of the hardest repertoire in concertos. Isn't that astounding to think about? You're a mid-teen, and
that's true.
And it's kind of stupid when you look back, but right, the pattern of learning is, put the violin under my chin, put the clarinet in my mouth, put the trumpet to your lips, and start to blow. Right? Yeah. I got notes to learn. Right?
I think one of the things we deal with in our society is being blinded by our ambition and by our dreams to the point where common sense doesn't kick in sooner. And that, that happens for athletes, that happens for musicians, where really what you need is a parent, or you need a teacher or a guardian to say, hey, okay, it's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to practice 10 hours a day. If and only if you're not doing damage, and to start to pay attention to what your body's saying to you, to pay attention to the risks involved. And so you get more of a sense of overall well-being and a progression of development of technique. But we're a society that is very impatient. We want what we want when we want it, and that's right now.
And Chris, what were you going to chime in about? You were going to say something about that.
No, we want the next prodigy. We want the next, and how many prodigies have just completely burned out or just are don't play the instrument anymore? Exactly what Doug says. We are an impatient society.
Mm-hmm.
But I did want to ask Doug, are you a mentor to people that have had the same condition or similar condition that you went through?
Yeah,
I called upon your expertise.
I get email and phone calls from people probably 3-4 times a year.
Mm-hmm.
That's great.
People that are going through embouchure. Yeah, and I feel like it's a chance for me to give them some hope. It's a chance for me to inform them about perspectives about how I recovered, and without knowing all the ins and outs, because I think the people that I've talked to have a pretty wide tapestry of issues and problems that they've had playing, but people that are dealing with injuries. So I think, and that's what I did. I spoke by phone with the gentleman in Barcelona who had a successful surgery operation, and he spoke very highly of Javier Planas. So that was comforting to me. So I feel like I'm paying that forward, and I feel like as a brass teacher, that it's up to me to kind of help my students out, and to keep them off the path of the oncoming train, so to speak, that I think I was on, because I was a kind of a compulsive practicer. I played too much repetition, and I think I could have just psychologically been a little bit easier on myself. The flip side is that that I did get a job because I could practice compulsively, and I was devoted to what I wanted to do, and I was scared. I was really scared as a young musician that I wouldn't be successful. I tell my students, here's a comparison for you. My daughter's a biomedical engineering major at UB. She's a senior. She's already got a job lined up her senior year. You're at the opposite end of that spectrum. Nobody's going to recruit you for a job. You have to make things happen. You have to really, really dig deep and find that fire in your belly and make it happen. And because there's nothing just waiting for you out there. And so I had that real sense of fear in me. And I think I overworked and overpracticed. And so it was a bit of a learning curve for me.
My wife, Karen, both you guys know, she asked me, Doug, when did you start to share this story? When was the first time that you were comfortable with it being public knowledge? Because it's obviously a playing affecting disorder.
I never ever felt skittish about talking about it. It was public when it happened.
Cool.
So it was already public. It was, Barbara Butler knew about it. Adolf Hirst had written a letter for me. I never felt at that point like there was any real reason to hide it. I didn't feel bad about my playing. I felt limited in some ways, but I felt really grateful for my recovery. So I didn't feel like it was that it was ever a delicate situation.
Mm-hmm.
There was a big expose in the Democrat and Chronicle here, and I think some of the other Gannett papers carried it. It might have been carried in some of the other cities in the Northeast here about my injury, and it was a kind of a promotional article for the Mahler Fifth performance that we did last spring.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I embrace that. I think it's, I don't see myself as damaged goods necessarily. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's sometimes when I get a little bit more tired sooner than I'd like to, but that's maybe that would have been there had I not had the injury anyway. But
we're all in our mid-50s, dude.
Yeah, exactly.
Something that I wanted to hide.
Yeah. It's an inspiring story. Guys, both of you, and that's why I wanted to put you on as the second musical episode of this podcast, because it's a story that I've gotten to tell to inspire other people, and it's great to hear it from your own mouths. Chris, I got to find out, what was your handicap before the accident and what was your handicap 10 years after the accident?
Oh, you know what? Honestly, I don't know. I was just sort of just starting to play a lot of golf in '91. So I probably was a 14 or 15 handicap. I'm a 9.2 now. So
Oh my gosh!
so it's going in the right direction.
Oh, you're a single handicap guy.
I wouldn't recommend going through the back windshield of a car to lower your handicap, but in my case, it actually worked out pretty well.
That is awesome. Well, Doug Prosser, principal trumpet of the Rochester Philharmonic, Chris Wu, first violinist in the Pittsburgh Symphony. You guys are lifelong friends. I count you that way, and you have an inspiring story. I can't wait to share it with the listeners. And thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you, John. And I've said thank you before, but it bears reminding that you actually got me hired in Barcelona. So
yeah,
thank you for jump-starting my career. That's a whole nother story.
Yeah, well,
Really
I will never forget my meeting with the music director where he called me in right before you started for the Britain's War Requiem, and he looked at me and he said, "I'm taking your word on this one, and if he doesn't work out, it's your ass in the frying pan." I will never forget those words. I was way more nervous for your first Hindemith and Britain concert than you were.
So John recommended me for the job, and the music director hired me for 3 weeks over the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my gosh.
John Hunter says you're good. Are you good?
He was literally that. He was literally that much of a Kapellmeister. It was true.
And I was like, yeah.
It all works in the circle, though, Doug, because Chris got me sight unseen hired at the St. Bart's Music Festival, and I think I went back there 8 times. I think I went back 8 seasons, and it wasn't until I'd already quit and started in business that the lady that was running the festival said, "What are you still doing here if you're not in an orchestra?"
Hey, it was a good run, though.
Yeah, and so am I playing still really good? Do you mind? She goes, "Yeah, I kind of mind." I never got hired again.
But in all seriousness, John, thanks for having us. Thanks for doing the podcast. It's wonderful for the listeners, but it's great for us to be able to retell our stories.
Oh, and they're great. Thank you both, and we'll talk again soon. I hope you enjoyed today's interview with Christopher Wu, violinist from the Pittsburgh Symphony, and Douglas Prosser, principal trumpet of the Rochester Philharmonic. Join us again for people and stories from the worlds of the symphony orchestra and commercial real estate for our next episode of Stages to Success. To success. To success. To success. To success. To success. To success.